Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hop-Ons podcast, a community review podcast sponsored by our Patreon supporters. My name is Colin Cox, and John and I are wearing old-time baseball hats tonight.
Oh, we are. Yeah, I'm John Phelps. I have a Brooklyn Dodgers hat. I've had this hat forever. This is like the first sort of fancy hat I ever bought myself, fancy fitted hat, and then it like wore out, and so I bought one just like it. And this one I've had for like 10 years. It's also on its way out as well. You have a great one, though. It's like a Phillies hat, right?
Right, so this is, I think, a 1941 Philadelphia Phillies hat, so...
Looks great. It looks good. We're not here to talk about that, but it'd be cool if we were.
The Philadelphia, I mean, I talk about this a lot to far too many people. They just decided to call themselves the Philadelphia Philly people.
It's a good name. I bought the Brooklyn Dodgers hat because one of my favorite movies of all time is Swingers, written by Jon Favreau, and he wears this hat in that movie. And I was, at the time, I was very malleable in what I liked. I just got molded into these things that I enjoyed. And so I had to just get everything that this man had, so I bought his hat. I did not turn into Jon Favreau. He is almost a billionaire because of all the Star Wars stuff he does. But me...
Oh, really? I don't think I knew that.
I'm in my basement talking to you, so...
Well, it's a really iconic hat, though.
It is.
Because,
it is.
You know, like, Jackie played for the Brooklyn Dodgers before they moved to Los Angeles.
Jackie Onassis.
That's the one. You
That
got
you're
it.
talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
I did the first female ball player. That's wild. I didn't know that. She ended up being Kennedy's wife and was the first female ball player. That's insane.
That's right. She was very good. Oh boy. Yeah. No, she was a slugger. So
Too bad she couldn't catch the bullet. Colin.
Oh God.
Oh!
Oh no. Well, he's dead. It's fine. John, we are here to discuss. I don't think that makes it fine. I guess the implication is she can't hear this episode as if she was a dedicated listener.
She would be like, one of the Kennedys is out there. Can you believe this? They're listening to this and they're very upset at that joke.
Wait, can I hear your Kennedy again, please?
Yeah. Can you believe this? What these people talk about? I feel like that's how the Kennedys talk, right?
Oh, yeah, I can't believe he made a joke about the bullet.
Oh, man.
Oh,
that was
yeah,
good.
I will catch him one day in an alley.
But, you know, hey, I heard that Bobby is going to run as Trump's VP, so...
Yeah, sure, yeah.
At least we have that to look forward to. I can ask him if he finds that offensive when he comes back from the fucking dead. Maybe we'll see how that goes.
It'll be a pretty remarkable ticket of candidates who you and I can do voices for. So
it's going to be great. Oh, wow. We are going to be just unfucking bearable.
Yeah, it'll be the silliest ticket in presidential U.S. presidential election history, just listening to these two guys talk. So, but no, John, we are here to discuss season 5, episode 6 of Community Analysis of Cork-Based Networking. This episode originally aired on January the 20th, 2014, directed by Tristram Shapiro and written by Monica Patrick.
Yeah.
She's new. I'm sorry I didn't have an opportunity. I was quite busy this afternoon. Let's just assume she probably wrote on, like, How I Met Your Mother, Rick and Morty, some Big Bang Theories.
Yeah,
you know, they
sense.
all seem to have similar sorts of credits.
Yeah.
I just saw it. Okay, yeah, I just saw it. So, John, this is your IMDb plot summary.
Yeah.
Annie and Hickey fight Greendale bureaucracy to install a bulletin board. Abed learns a lesson about sign language. Well, maybe. And the others discover the challenges of planning a properly sensitive school dance. That's actually a funny summary, I think.
Sure. Yeah.
John, for a bit of context, I just saw it a second ago. So, yeah, on ABC, The Taste at 2.4.
Still kicking. All right.
Yes, it is. John, on CBS, The Rather Large Concept at 11.3. That's fun.
Well, that's fascinating. It's almost like someone went to thesaurus.com and put in The Big Bang Theory to see what would come up. Who would do that?
Have I told you my favorite? I've told you this. My favorite thesaurus-based joke.
Oh no, please tell me.
Okay, so it's an episode of Friends. It's a late episode, late season episode. Monica and Chandler are trying to receive approval for adoption, and Joey writes their letter of recommendation, and so he sounds smart and authoritative. He changes every word using the thesaurus,
Yeah.
and he finishes with, like, sincerely, baby kangaroo Tribbiani.
Because of Joey. What a joke.
It's
What a joke.
just a remarkably stunning joke.
Colin's yucking it up over that one, guy.
No, it's like one of my favorite silly jokes. Baby kangaroo Tribbiani. Yeah, the big winner, John, the rather large concept at 11.3.
Yeah.
On Fox, American Idol at 6.7.
Wow. Colin, this was the Disturbs night when they took it home.
Oh, God. We're giggling a lot tonight. Well, this is a funny episode, so I think maybe it's appropriate. The big loser, but not by much. Competitive with the taste. Community on NBC at 2.
Okay, so the taste was 2.1, and we're at 2. Not bad.
4.
Oh, 2.4. Okay, well, that's a little bit of a bummer. That is a little bit of a bummer. This episode, jam-packed full of things.
Yes, it is.
Probably to its detriment. I think at one point I was watching the episode earlier today, and I like thought, oh, we got to be near the end, and I looked, and there was 8 minutes left, and I thought, holy fuck, that's almost half of the show is still left. What has happened? There's so much happening. I think the Abed plotline is pointless and dumb. And the Britta plotline is weird. And at the end, when she hands over the big stack of money, I thought, where did Britta get this fucking big stack of money from?
I thought the same
to give to this very, I guess, mean deaf person? I don't know. That was a weird play at the end for this. I didn't like that at all. It was very mean. And not the deaf person, just the whole idea was just so incredibly callous and rude to Abed.
He's just, the Kennedys are going to come and get him. The entire deaf community is after this man.
I know, everybody's going to hate my guts after this one. But no, I think it's fascinating. The episode reminded me of two things that I love a lot, and I can't wait to talk to you about them. One being the bumpers in this episode remind me, some of my favorite films are movies that, like, in the last 5 minutes, the weirdest thing happens that has nothing to do with the rest of the story, and that's the ending. And I love that immensely. And I wanted to talk about a couple of those. And also, one of my favorite episodes ever of This American Life is an episode called Petty Tyrant that is about this guy named Steve Rossi who was in, I think, the Chicago or New Jersey school district. And he was the head of maintenance. And he literally would do these horrifically insane things to teachers to get his way. And it reminded me so much of this episode. Okay. It's one of the first big episodes Sarah Koenig does. It's like what got her serial, basically, is this episode of This American Life.
Oh, okay.
I highly recommend it. When I watched it, the whole time I thought, this reminds me so much of a real-life thing that's happened, which is insane. But yeah, I like this episode a lot. I do think it has too much in it, and some of the stuff I think they could have left out, but it's a fine episode.
It feels like a proof of concept episode for me. One of the things I know you and I want to talk about is, well, what do we think of this first post-Troy episode? And you can even imagine the Abed plot is maybe more of a concept car than anything else. Can we put Abed with someone else and it be interesting and meaningful? And you'll see this more throughout this season. The show seems to decide that he and Annie work really well together at some point, so she seems to function or operate as Abed's like primary friend in the wake of Troy leaving. Okay. But clearly pairing him with Britta, again, it's more than anything like proof of concept. Can we do this show without Troy? What will Abed as a character look like and function like and operate like without Troy. I agree with you. I have a lot of things to say about the Annie narrative as someone who works at a college. I've maybe not to this degree had to grapple with and address, like, maybe I would call it not bureaucratic incompetence, but just like how
Sure.
these even, and like I work at a small regional community college, but even the bureaucracy within that college at times can feel quite large, almost like you're in Brazil or something, right? And like just the paperwork and paperwork gets lost. I can tell you this story about how I was on a grant project and none of us had received any of our stipends, and we later learned the paperwork was just sitting on someone's desk. It was just sitting there for months. I do think, again, this is also an episode that wants to test the degree to which Hickey can work as a character, and you'll see this in the next episode as well. He has something of a primary role. The C plot is just hilarious. I mean, the fat dog stuff, the bear down stuff is
It's
so
wild,
incredibly
man.
funny.
It's so goddamn
It's
good.
so incredibly funny.
It is, yeah.
But I also agree, this is, this episode reminded me a bit of an Arrested Development episode, considering how full it is.
Sure.
I counted 3 Labyrinth references for some bizarre reason. They just keep talking about Labyrinth, and I don't know why. But I think on the whole, I like this episode, even though I don't know if I have, like, it's not one of those episodes where I think you and I can spend an hour and a half talking about it. I just don't think there's enough substance here.
There's not, for sure. I think the relationship between Hickey and Annie is something to talk about. Hickey's a very good character in this episode, especially seeing like subtly the way that he still tries to have his cop morals about him, or I shouldn't say cop morals, like just ingrained good person mentality. And I love when Annie is talking about what a bulletin board can represent to people, and then we get to see, at the end, Hickey sort of has all that on his bulletin board in his office.
That's nice.
The dean is nuts in this. I think they cater Chili's. I feel like that's like a Chili's thing, where like they got the fajitas and the margaritas at the end.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a lot to dive into. We get a big Game of Thrones sort of parody at the beginning. Conquest of Bloodlines, is that what they call it?
That could work too, but it's Bloodlines of Conquest.
Okay, same difference.
Yeah.
That's what opens the episode, and the story with Abed and Britta is that Britta's a character. What she says in this, I hate these kind of people that don't want to be spoiled by a show that's been out for 4 seasons. What are you going to do? And so she decides to read all the books to spoil Abed, and then that turns into her conniving this super mean plot and making Abed feel incredibly sad and discouraged at the end of the episode. And that's it.
Do you think that was her intention, though? Clearly that surprised her a bit, right? Yeah.
No, but she actually mentions at some point, like, are you going to, I can't remember the verbiage, but are you going to, like, deeply connect with someone in a very short amount of time? She actually says that as, like, a wink to the audience.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't like that storyline. The stuff with Chang and Jeff taking a huge backseat in this episode. Mm-hmm. Duncan sort of joining. The study group has now turned into the Save Greendale Committee. I think they've just branched out so they could have more characters, essentially. And Shirley, and that story is it's direct out of Arrested Development. It's just an Arrested Development plot line that they've put into this. It's exactly what this is. Save Our Bluths is just like this. When they make up, what's the disease they make up in Arrested Development?
It's TBD.
Oh yeah,
because
TBD, they don't have one.
Well, because they started a charity, but they had not decided on a disease. And so then everyone in Orange County thought the disease was TBD.
TBD.
And they raised a lot of money. And as I think Ron Howard says, and here's the worst part, they did it again next year.
Yeah. Yeah. And that story's so good.
Tobias, he had Graft v. Host. Is that right?
Graft v. Host, yeah.
Yeah.
What an insane thing. But anyway, that's how I feel about the episode. So, yeah, where would you like to begin, man? What do you want to talk
Well,
about?
I think maybe we can perhaps discuss each of these narratives in turn, but I think a great place to start, John, is just this question about Troy or the missing Barnes. And we actually get I don't know if you saw the reference to Troy and LeVar Burton at the end of the episode.
I didn't until I read your notes, and then when I
Yeah.
watched it again, I noticed it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's maybe that Chiron or that
yeah.
breaking news alert. Did you have any fears or concerns watching this show for the first time about what the first non-Troy episode would feel like?
I don't think I did. I think the episode handles it pretty well. I thought there could be a way that they just spend like a lot of time talking about like the emotions that Abed's through, which is fine. I think that would be interesting, but for a comedic television show, I don't necessarily know if that's something you can spend a lot of time on. And here, instead of even bringing that up to question it, they just jam so much into an episode that I think a viewer forgets that Troy's even part of the show. You know, that's at least that's what I got out of it.
Yeah, again, that's one of the reasons why I describe maybe Abed's narrative as a kind of concept narrative, why I think this episode tries to really confirm that the larger premise for this show can work without Troy. And one of the reasons why it feels, as you said, just so full and even so frenetic at times, because it seems like I could feel maybe the episode's anxiety about not having Troy. And in response, it's just, let's see how big and wild we can make practically everything.
Sure.
You'll see a bit of like the next episode is a really good Abed episode where maybe some of
Okay.
what you expected, right? This character grappling with maybe a bit of depression, a bit of loneliness. It's subtle, but we see a bit of that in the next episode, which is really nice. And the show infrequently returns to the loss of Troy in interesting ways. But I agree with you. I think this is probably the best move forward, which is just try to pretend like Troy was never a part of the show, which
Yeah.
frankly feels like what they do with Pierce, right? They have the one
Oh,
goodbye
sure.
Pierce episode.
I
And
didn't
then,
even
and
think
then
about
that's
Pierce
it.
at all in this
Yeah,
episode.
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and when's the last time you thought about Pierce? I didn't have concerns either because I think conceptually this show maybe doesn't need. I don't know if it needs any one character. I think that's what's really interesting about the show. I could be wrong about that. I'm sure someone would probably challenge me and say no, the show probably needs Winger, right? But I think, and I mentioned this maybe in the last episode. I just cannot envision what this show could do with that character that they had not already done. It really felt like they had reached a kind of natural telos with this character. Like we've reached the end of what this character can do for this show, so perhaps it is best to move forward instead of just recapitulating the same narratives over and over. But I was just curious how you felt about it. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely are aware of the loss of the show. I mean, if you look, if when you watch this episode, if I watched this episode as a fan of the show, I think that would have been in my brain until I saw like, I think there's Camille Nanjiani and Nathan Fillion and Robert Patrick and Paget Brewster, all randomly show up in this episode. And so I think that is maybe their way of look over here, you know, look at this
yeah.
hand while I'm doing my other tricks with the other hand, so you don't remember Troy. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the vibe I got with there's so many guest stars, and I
Yeah.
couldn't really grasp why. And they go really deep into the lore of Greendale here, which they haven't done in ages. And I think
Yeah.
by doing that, we just completely forget about that story and to focus it all on Annie and Hickey, who's a new character. It definitely, I didn't feel the Troy loss at all. I mean, I think that was purposeful.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. That's a really good point. I mean, just because this is not a show that does a lot of these like stunt guest episodes, right? With a bunch
and Brie
of
Larson
just,
too. She's in it. Yeah.
Oh, and let us not forget that that Chekhov's gun at the beginning, right? About how you have these intense connections with characters we will never see again.
Yeah.
How many Community fans were probably thinking, will that Brie Larson character return at some point? And of course she does. She's shoehorned into the end of this episode as well.
Yeah.
I like that point, John, thinking about all of these characters, whether they're return characters like Brie Larson's character or these new characters, as necessary distractions. But I also like this point about how this is a deeply, Greendale episode in the best kind of way, right? This is not a big concept episode. This is not a episode that needs to say, this is not a bottle episode, wishing Pierce fond farewells or whatever. This is just a weird Greendale episode where people get to do like weird shit. And of course it makes sense because of this place. And again, in that way, as you mentioned with Arrested Development, this reminds me of a Bluth Family Party. This reminds me of a Bluth Company-centric episode.
Yeah.
Because the wildest things happen at like companies and locations owned or operated by the Bluth Company. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Well, let's maybe start with the A plot. Annie and Hickey. It seems like, and again, I talk about this a lot, how I like a kind of maybe relationship between the high and the low plot. I don't know if there is one here. This just feels like a series of plots sandwiched together. But, John, the theme here seems to be Greendale as a place that's inflicted with a kind of institutional rot, which is not a new concept. But I think the idea that Greendale has even a bureaucratic apparatus as functional as this is a little surprising to me, because this is something the show has never addressed.
Yeah, and it all stems from Annie is trying to, from a place of goodness, change just a few things about Greendale. And so she has made a list. She said, I've printed out a small list, and this is like a list as big as like fucking Dostoevsky. It's like the biggest list in the universe. And she's like, we're going to do a few things. One of them is to have a dance for midterms.
This is the midterm dance. Yeah.
The midterm dance. And so she said, I'll be on that committee. And quickly Shirley, Duncan, and Jeff join that committee because they know Annie will do all the work.
Yeah,
and
the decorating committee specifically.
The decorating committee.
Yeah.
And so Hickey is like, I don't want to be on that committee. I would never do that. And so he decides, she gives him the job of, you have to put a billboard up. A bulletin board. Mm-hmm. And so that's like the basic, that's the opening. That's it. That's the story. Mm-hmm. And from there, we follow Hickey trying to get the bulletin board up. He immediately runs into red tape, and he goes to Annie, and he's like, I've dealt with red tape like my whole career. This is when we stop. We don't have to worry about this anymore. It's not going to happen. And she immediately leaves the dance committee because she doesn't take no for an answer regarding these things. Mm-hmm. And then we get to see sort of this dynamic of how they talk to people. At the beginning, they both sort of know their wits about them. Like Annie can use her charm to talk to the custodians. Hickey can use his charisma, and he can put on this like sort of fake misogynistic bullshit to talk to the custodians. Mm-hmm. And that's a nice sort of like dichotomy of those two working together, I think, in that way. And then it just goes fucking off the rails from there.
Well, Annie, at least early, feels like a bit of a politician, right? She remembers
absolutely, yeah,
people's names. Hickey, it's interesting because his approach, it feels like he's waging something of a Cold War, because he's not explicitly saying what he wants or what he's prepared to give them, nor are they explicitly articulating what they need and what they want and what they're prepared to give.
For sure.
But they seem to understand one another, right? And this is both absurd and silly. The custodial staff just wants the porn back. That's it. That's all this is about.
But we should state, like, from the beginning, Hickey doesn't even want them to hang The bulletin board, he just wants
Sure.
the materials to go do it himself, which
Sure.
he eventually does at the end of the episode. The
Right.
only thing he asks for, he's like, "Can I borrow a drill, some nails, and a bulletin board if you have one laying around?" That's all he says.
Right.
And it turns into this, like, the custodians want the porn, they want porn unblocked. So they go to the IT person. She wants a parking space because where she parks, she's something akin to a lunch lady, which is a very funny
Sure.
thing. Then they go to the parking manager, which is not a thing that exists, and the parking manager's like, "Well, I want you to give me full control of the bulletin board so that I can get rid of any ride sharing programs, so we
This
can
is
charge
hilarious.
for parking," which is so
This is
mafioso.
hilarious. Yeah, this is hilarious. Like, I don't even, I mean, I may have missed this. John, I didn't even get the impression that he saw this as having any, like, positive financial ramifications. He just speaks about it as power. That, like,
Right.
parking spaces are a limited commodity. If I can better control said limited commodity, like, he's basically talking about supply and demand here, right? Like, I have more power when the supply is low and the demand is high. That's all and listen, sidebar for a second. There's weird bulletin board stuff at my community college as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
about this, right?
Oh, I have some ideas.
John? At some point last year, so professors, and when I say decorate, I want to be very clear about what I mean. Most of us have education-related material and paraphernalia on our office doors.
Okay.
I, for example, have flyers to a movie appreciation club. It's a student community organization. I'm the faculty advisor. We come to campus one day. Someone has removed all of them from everyone's door without any approval, just because someone was frustrated with the visual appearance of paraphernalia on professors' doors.
So you don't know who this was?
We know who it was, and it was weird.
Was it a student or a professor?
No. This was someone affiliated with the college. It was an employee.
And they just got upset at the stuff on your doors.
I mean, I can't say too much, but basically, John, they, did I tell you what I did in response?
No.
Oh, I made a flyer, like the jankiest flyer you could find. And all I had on it were 3 images in the following language: save sad puppies. And I just found images of sad puppies. And I said, if I put this on my door, do you think they'll take it down?
Did they?
No, I just sent it to my dean, and I said, I'm prepared. If you would like, I can put this on my door to see how far they'll take this. I found the saddest
that is
puppies,
insane.
John. It's insane and hilarious. I'll send it to you. They were incredibly sad puppies. So that's.
Oh
but
my
yeah,
God.
like I've met that parking guy before. Someone who is like such a really frustrating institutionalist who uses any of these little opportunities just to accumulate as much power as possible, even if the power itself, John, is utterly meaningless. Like, I want to control the number of parking spaces available because doing so puts me in an elevated position of power. I've encountered this so many times.
Yeah, and we should talk about above the parking guy was the dean. And if you want to know how silly this all is, all the dean wanted, all he wanted was for Hickey to say easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Yeah.
That's all the dean wanted. The dean didn't even care, which makes me mad at the end when the dean gets frustrated and wants him to take the bulletin board down. Because in my brain I thought Dean Pelton would not give a fuck at all about them putting this bulletin board up. But that's what happened. That's all the dean wants. Yeah.
It like there was something about his performance, John. I would probably need someone to like clarify the reference, but it felt like he was actively making a performance choice.
Yeah,
That
like a prison
felt,
warden. That's what it felt
yeah,
like.
yeah. Like it's the way he did the hands, right?
Yeah, for sure,
As if,
for sure.
or like even what the principal from it's not 16 Candles.
The Breakfast Club.
Yeah, like the principal from the Breakfast Club, right? He had
Yeah,
that kind of attitude about him.
yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah,
Yeah. So we get to see like this bureaucracy at work, and everyone. It would seem, apart from Hickey, that they confront. And I'll say this about the IT person as well. Everyone else they meet seems to be sort of the worst.
sure.
The IT person doesn't even. And that's what's funny is like, she doesn't even ask for anything until Annie mentions it. She doesn't want anything at all. She's like, all they have to do is put in a request, and I'll see what I can do. But in fact, what they want is just a disgusting, terrible thing. They don't just want like one website. They don't want like Craigslist unblocked.
Sure. Yeah. No, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well, it's
so we get to
interesting.
see this
Sorry,
bureaucratic
sorry.
nastiness. No, go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's just it's interesting watching like Annie's reaction says maybe more about her than it does about the Paget Brewster character played.
Yeah.
She plays this IT lady, and I think I told you she returns in season 6 as a proper cast member and everything. But I think this says more about Annie, this idea that Annie just assumes she's being coy because she wants something. And so Annie, like, you're right. She doesn't start to even think about what she could want until Annie suggests it. But I think what's interesting about this, John, and as you said, like watching these two characters grapple with this bureaucracy is how it gives us an opportunity to better understand both Annie and Hickey. And I think we probably always knew this about Annie, that the ends justify the means for her, you know? Yeah. But with Hickey, and I think this is probably why you might see him as a more like ethically consistent character, he's far more interested in the means, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We cannot celebrate the ends unless we have ethically consistent means. And that's always an interesting and fruitful dynamic when you have two characters who are so diametrically opposed to one another in that way. Annie is all about the ends, Hickey is all about the means. And of course those two will, clash and confront one another because their philosophies are so fundamentally different.
Yeah, and Hickey is not really even that upset about it until the rideshare thing, when he thinks that this could inconvenience students. That's that's the first time he's actually like, this is bullshit. We cannot do this. And I appreciate that about that character. I think he's a very, and it could be an answer to Pierce. It could be an answer to how fucking terrible Pierce was. Like, they put this ethically, morally good person in as the quote unquote, senior character. And I think maybe that is why he is the way he is. And I genuinely like it. It's like a breath of fresh air, honestly.
Yeah. Well, because Pierce was always a character who was more interested in the means, right?
Right. For sure.
The ends. The
ends,
means
yeah,
were
the ends,
irrelevant to the means were irrelevant to Pierce. And I mean, it certainly does feel like for a lot of characters in this group, they are more naturally inclined to valuing the ends over the means. I mean, I think that was at least Jeff's ethos for the longest time, right? Just win and win by any means possible. Chang and all of his machinations, they were really like these attempts to drive toward a particular end, which is maybe acceptance and recognition. I would need to think about Abed, like, I don't know, like Abed even like early season 1 episodes. If you remember maybe episode 2, when he uses Jeff and Britta to make this short film about his father, he's very much thinking of them as just means to an end. And I agree with you. I think it is refreshing to finally see a character who cares about the means more so than the ends, because this seems new for this show. At least, I don't know, I would argue it seems new to some degree,
No, I agree with that. Yeah. So, ultimately it ends with Hickey just taking his bulletin board out of his office and putting it back in the cafeteria in the common space. And the dean tries to stop him for reasons unknown, and Annie has a complete meltdown and joins Hickey's side, and the bulletin board stays. And that's the bulletin board story in a nutshell. You should watch it. It's wild. I'll tell you that much. It's fucking nuts.
Yeah. I mean, can we talk about just Hickey's decision at the end? Because I want to try something, and I'll tell you it's a bit half-baked, but I'm curious to know what you think.
Okay.
I think you and I both... Well, maybe you can clarify if I'm wrong. I think you and I both agree that one of the more odious ideas that, in particular, American film perpetuates is the supremacy and the superiority of the individual, right? And this is like one of these deeply frustrating, like, American ideological ideas, right? Think about the bootstraps. Think about this idea that if you are not successful, it's because there's something wrong with you as the individual.
For sure.
As an individual. And those people who succeed, they succeed because they are these capital I individuals. And again, like a lot of movies, like is not Batman more often than not a celebration of the power of the individual? I mean, I know Batman has friends and everything, but at least from a cinematic perspective, Batman doesn't have friends. It's just Batman alone doing what only exceptional people can do. I mean, if you think about so many of the characters that Clint Eastwood played, these like singular, unique, powerful individuals who used their uniqueness to effect change, maybe in a positive way, perhaps not in every situation. It really feels like that's the framing here at the end of the episode, is what Greendale needs is just a powerful, confident individual.
Oh, okay.
And the institution itself is utterly feckless to make any meaningful change, because the institution has corrupted all of these people. But in response to that, we have the Hickeys of the world, these exceptional individuals who can positively affect change. And I don't know if I like that so much as like a thesis statement for this narrative. But you can tell me if you think I'm wrong, because I think this point's a bit half-baked for me.
That's wild. It's a wild thing you said. I don't think so. I think I disagree with you.
Okay.
Simply because I think in this episode, there's not many moments where Hickey, as I can see it, has that type of mentality.
Okay.
That I would compare to like a Blondie from the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, or a character from another Eastwood movie. You know, that kind of like, he is sort of like the silent, unspoken hero that a lot of, you know, he definitely has the same sort of cadence and vibrato of like an old-timey Western hero, like your John Waynes and your Gary Coopers, something along those lines. But I think those characters, it's fascinating. This is great. What a great little thing to talk about now. I would compare him to like a character like a John Wayne in The Searchers. The Searchers is a phenomenally good movie. And
stunning film.
His story in The Searchers is, it's fucked up. His niece gets kidnapped by a Native American tribe. I don't know, maybe Navajo. And she assimilates into the tribe and becomes the chief's wife. And so this character, Ethan's his name, he spends years, right after the Civil War, trying to hunt down this tribe and get his niece back. And when he finally gets to his niece, he has to decide whether to kill her or save her because of how racist he is.
Yes.
And so this whole movie is just about him trying to come to the means of saving this person he loves. And so he ultimately does. Spoiler alert for a movie from 1955.
Right, I was about to say
he ultimately saves her, and he delivers her back home. And I think in that way, he's not heroic. He does something that a good person would do. You understand what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think that's how he wants to think
difference.
about it, right? Because even
that's how he wants to think about it. Sure.
Yeah. Because like save is in scare quotes, right? He saved her, right? Yeah,
right. And the Hickey situation is not anything like that.
No,
but
it's
I
not,
think he ultimately does what a good person would do for the greater good. And I think maybe that's a little bit different than what you're saying.
Well,
but
okay.
I'm sure it's on that same path, I guess.
Right, and I mean, I want to be clear. Like all of those examples I listed, I think you're right. The specifics are different. I suppose what I was thinking about is, well, how does the narrative frame those kinds of characters? And in a movie like The Searchers, whether or not we think the particular choices that character makes are good or bad, the point is, I think the movie wants us to think they're good choices, right? And the thing that allows that character to make those choices is his abilities as this, let us say, superior individual, right? I suppose now what I'm thinking about more than anything is the form, right? Like within these kinds of narratives, even if the content is different, even if the characters are slightly different, these are narratives that endorse the power of these singular individuals who must work outside of these institutions, because these institutions, whatever the institutions are just completely and utterly like feckless. They are utterly ineffectual to positively make change in the world. That necessitates these like quasi-rogue individuals. And I guess like that's what I was maybe trying to suggest is like, yeah, like he's not necessarily a cowboy in the way cowboys are in Westerns.
Right.
But he is insofar as...
No, he is.
Yeah, yeah, he is, because he's that, supremely unique individual who can affect change by, going rogue, like individuals often do in these kinds of movies. So that's, and like, again, I think you're someone who agrees with me, and you can tell me if you're wrong, that part of what's really pernicious about those narratives is that they convince people that collective action is impossible, and the only way to have a good life is to look out for you and yours, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think movies like that, especially like The Searchers or media like that, are deeply, deeply sad and deeply unsettling. And especially like, I can remember when I watched that film, because like my grandfather like was obsessed with John Wayne. My grandfather was a giant asshole. He was obsessed with John Wayne. He would talk about the hero, what a hero he was, and like nobody could take the Duke out and all this stuff. And I can remember watching that as a young child, and even then recognizing this guy's a huge piece of shit. Like even recognizing this man is terrible, and that's a fascinating story, because John Ford, the director, like wants to ride the line and say, you choose, you pick which one you think he is.
Yeah.
And for most people, I would say at that time in America, they're going to say he's a hero. And I think, no, I mean, I don't want to get into like the whole Trump spiel, but that's sort of why we're in the situation we're in,
Yeah.
Because people looked at Ethan in The Searchers and thought he was Superman. So yeah, I think Hickey rides the line for good the whole time. He's definitely more of a Batman style character, I would say.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've dipped into a little bit of scholarship about movies like The Searchers, and I think like some scholars almost want to argue that it's an active critique and like dismantling of that John Wayne ethos that your grandfather seemed to like and celebrate so much, because there is this ambiguity. And maybe I think for some scholars, John, there's actually no ambiguity at all. It's like, no, like, he's terrible, and that's the
awful,
point.
yeah.
And that's the point,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Like the interesting trick the movie plays is, and I think you like see this, or you see the possibility for this in movies like contemporary movies like Black Panther, where I think Killmonger's right, but the movie cannot avow that, so he like kills his girlfriend, right? So then like he's a mustache twirling villain at that point. But like if you actually like interrogate the ideologies of these characters, I think most of us would probably agree more with Killmonger than with the Chadwick Boseman character, right?
Yeah, I think that is That's fact, because any like Marvel movie where I can remember the villain, it's always because I side with them. It's always because I go, oh yeah, they got it right. I get it. I sort of get what he's doing. And with Killmonger, it took a long time for me to be like, I don't know. I'm on this guy's side for most of this movie, I think.
Yeah, and that's so John, when I was talking about like the form the movie takes, either rejects or embraces
Absolutely,
that,
for sure.
Like the form of that movie, the form of Black Panther, that's the reason why he has that scene or sequence when he like brutally kills his girlfriend, because without that, he's actually not the villain. If the movie did not have him do that, you know who the villain is. It's Black Panther.
Yeah.
Like Marvel, like we can't do that, kids. Like so, can we?
Can't do that.
I mean, you can just like see it in the writers' room. Like, hey, do you think audiences might come to the conclusion that Killmonger's right? Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Maybe we should have him strangle a woman. Let's do it. That'll do it. Like that's perfect, right? Yeah.
Right.
Then we know what he actually is. Yeah.
Yeah. Heaven forbid audiences get to think and have brains.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, that's what Hitchcock always said. Like the villain makes the picture. So yeah.
And he would know. He was a bit of a villain himself. Anyway, Colin, let's move on.
Who would disagree with Alfred Hitchcock about anything moving forward? Oh, no, did I just cancel the podcast? So, and listen, I'm being serious. I don't want anyone to clip this and make it sound like I said Alfred Hitchcock did nothing wrong.
Speaking of that, there's a great documentary on Shudder about queer cinema and the history of queer cinema. And they go deep into Hitchcock and his films. He worked with a lot of gay actors purposefully.
Sure.
Anthony Perkins being like the biggest notable example of the perfect, beautiful star in Psycho, was actually a gay man, and it's fascinating. Hitchcock's a piece of garbage, but he made some pretty great pictures.
Yeah, and again, like part of what's really interesting is as you said, when you study the history of queer cinema, whether it's overt or implicit, figures like Hitchcock are complicated because, sure, it sounds like he actively sought and hired gay actors to give them work in an environment where if they were open or out or there was any suspicion, they would not receive work, while making movies like Psycho, which I think you could probably argue isn't maybe a sympathetic queer rendering of a character, like in the same way that like,
oh, for sure,
what the Silence of the Lambs does with this notion of like what it might mean to, I believe Hannibal Lecter describes him as a like transsexual or something, right? And like he's just again a mustache twirling villain because of that. At least that's what the movie seems to argue or suggest.
Yeah.
So
it's just a bummer that Alfred Hitchcock literally hated women. Colin, let's talk about quickly the dance, shall we?
Yeah, let's okay. You sent me a message this morning, and I believe you said, I've been laughing so hard since I heard Fat Dog It.
No, not since I read it. Since I read it. I can, like, when I watched it, because the first thing they do is they show the sign after they've changed it from Bear Down. And it just says Fat Dog for midterms with no context. And it's fucking hilarious. Yeah. I just could not stop laughing. And the reason they changed it from it was Bear Down for midterms, which was Chang's idea. And as he's coming up with, I love this like mystery of how he's getting there, because he wants to put bears everywhere, and then he's like, and we have to have party hats, birthday hats. Yeah. And they just go with it, because at this point Chang is really trying hard, I think, to be better than he was. Yeah. And then we find out that Chang heard on the news that a group of bears attacked and murdered a bunch of people at a birthday party.
In Milwaukee, I think.
In Milwaukee, and that's where Chang got the idea from. That scene of realization when he snaps his fingers and he goes, that's where it's from. Perfect.
Stunning.
Fucking perfect.
Stunning, yeah.
So they changed it to Fat Dog fat dog for midterms. And when asked what that is, it means, when you're nonchalant about something, don't worry about it. Fat dog it. And you know what? I'm here for it. That's a great saying.
This is what Jeff says. It's an expression. Fat dog for midterm. Like, don't sweat it, fat dog it. Hang out, relax like a fat dog, man.
Oh man,
they make it
fat
dance.
Dog it.
Like Chang has a whole fat dog dance. John,
it's great.
This is
great.
my favorite. I mean, this has like strong take a look at Banner Michael vibes. This is fantastic. Yeah. It's one of the coolest, silliest things they do. Fat dog it for midterms.
Fat dog
I love
for midterms.
saying it so much. It's so funny.
And then one of my favorite moments, and I forgot about it the first time, is when Garrett bumps into the dogs and the ear falls off.
Yeah.
And he screams that it's a bear dance.
Yeah.
That was so funny.
End of the episode. Yeah.
What a great little moment. That's a very funny B plot. It's perfectly paced and executed for a comedy show. That's so nonsensical that you can't help but love every second of it. It was great.
It was wonderful. And we can only assume that realization that it was a bear party probably produced another riot on campus. We just didn't see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's so many like strong riot vibes after like the way the camera positions Garrett. Fat dog it. There's a Wikipedia entry, John, and everything. So
I love that. Yeah. I love when they say that, and Shirley and Duncan do like the little finger thing to make you know that they wrote the Wikipedia entry, just so if Annie Googled it, there would be something there.
Yeah. I mean, this feels
brilliant.
I mean, I think there are these times when Community feels almost atemporal in some ways, but this is one of those this is one of those moments that feels very like 2012, 2013, 2014, the idea that like you could just pop on and create a Wikipedia page, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, totally.
I loved it. Fat dog it. I don't have a lot to say about the Abed plot. It's there. It happens. Like you said, I think they're trying to sort of pitch ideas of Abed, what works, what sinks, what swims, and I think this was a stinker of a plot. It was not my favorite thing.
I'll be frank with you because I've watched obviously all of the episodes. This feels like a Trojan horse just to get Brie Larson back in the show in an organic way.
Okay. All right. Sure.
And I don't know if you had any thoughts about that. The return of this character who we first met in season 4 when she and Abed had this nice little meet cute when he did the 2 dates at a dance or something. Yeah. So
I think she's great. I liked her a lot in this episode. She's without trying to be, she's extremely charming. Mm-hmm. And I think she serves that role of possible love interest for Abed really well. She's very subdued in her character, and I love that their first date is just them with a giant thing of popcorn watching a movie. Like, that's perfect. Yeah. That's a perfect Abed thing. So yeah, I think that was nice. That's a nice little moment that Abed gets post Troy to maybe make you think, as you might not have realized it, but your brain did, that Abed is going to be okay. I think that's sort of what they're hinting at.
Yeah, and that's an interesting way to think about it. And I think you're right. Is subtly what's percolating under this is that question: what will all of this mean for Abed? And I think inserting this character, as you said, does the work to maybe assure us that Abed is fine. Because it's funny, the way I pitched the question earlier was, did you have any concerns about the show? And maybe a more accurate way of asking the question is, did you have any concerns about Abed? And it feels like this narrative, as you said, was engineered to ensure all of us that Abed Nadir will be fine with Troy leaving. Yeah.
And that's the vibe I got at the end of it. I really quickly want to talk about the bumpers.
Okay.
If we can.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about more than this, but we can get back to that in just a second. So
we can do that now, because I have a lot to say about the bumpers. So let's go on with that. What a great tune, by the way.
Yeah. This is a song that feels like it's been in a lot of movies, but I don't know if it has. But one of the most notable times was in this movie Lost in Translation, directed by Sofia Coppola. I think her second directing effort. Bill Murray sings
I've never
it.
seen that movie. Never seen it.
I don't want to say it's good. I remember liking it when I saw it. I'll say that. Yeah, this is like 03,
I know
04.
him and Scarlett hang out and like do
in Tokyo.
Japan or something.
Yeah, I think they're in Tokyo, and like the idea is they feel like these disconnected, disaffected individuals, and they in the like, as they're mired in these like awful, depressed, like dislocated feelings, they find one another for a moment. And I think this song like definitely has like some symbolic work, or like helps to develop one of those themes in the movie. So, but yeah,
this song had to have been covered for like a romantic teen comedy, right? It had to have been.
That's what I was thinking, John, but I couldn't find a lot of info about it. So
It sounds like a song that like Letters to Cleo or Sixpence None the Richer, like they would cover.
Indeed, yeah. And
More
maybe
if they
maybe
haven't,
that's
they
it,
should.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it's been covered in movies, but not the original. So
It reminds me of like the end of She's All That, or
that's what I was thinking. Yeah,
the end of like your like a Can't Hardly Wait,
like
or
a Can't Hardly Wait, if you will. Yeah.
a 10 Things I Hate About You. That
A
would
10
be
Things
in there.
I Hate About You. I could see that.
Yeah.
That's
What happened
I
to
was
those
thinking.
movies? Those fucking bang. What happened to movies like that?
Hey, 10
Where'd
Things
they
I Hate.
go?
I know 10 Things I Hate About You is a highly loose adaptation of The Taming of the Shrew, I think.
Yeah. Clueless.
Yeah.
An Emma adaptation.
An Emma adaptation, yeah.
Also a banger of a teenage comedy. Where'd these go? Who stopped making these?
Well, I mean, I think this is one of those times where we can say like the 90s was the best, so I'm kidding. But
They need to make more movies like this and include a cover by like Paramore of More Than This.
Oh, sure.
So that it will appease the timeline
Oh, sure.
that you and I have now created.
Yeah, where I just assumed this song has been in more movies than I think it's actually been in, so...
Who's some 80s band I don't know sings it?
Oh, it's I had it before. Roxy Music.
Roxy Music. What a name. What a name for a group. There's got to be a
like
cover. Anyway, it's a good song. It's a
feels
great
like a
montage
TV
song. Fantastic montage song.
It is a great. That's. I think that's why I had assumed it had been in other movies. Roxy Music feels like a TBD name for a band, right? So.
You guys play sort of rock music. What's your name? Roxy Music.
Roxy Music. Yeah, we'll change it later.
We'll workshop it.
Okay.
Okay.
Talk to me about the bumpers, John.
The bumpers. Most of the time, the bumpers in this show have like nothing to do with anything. And this one, I love that. Number one, it's Duncan, who is not really like your main character. And what Duncan does in this is he's trying to he's trying to replace staples in a stapler, and he can't find them. He's out, and so he's going to call, I think, like school supplies or something, like
Basic
an internal
work order,
supply
it seems.
closet. And
Just
so
a
he
work
calls
order,
he calls
basically,
like a Greendale, the college, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And he waits long enough through the menu that I guess no one's waited this long, and he gets to a secret clearance menu where he enters buttons, and he's asked for his authorization code where he enters like 6 things and hits the whole keypad at once, and that's apparently the right code. And someone on the other line says, "What's your clearance?" And he just says the word "top," which I guess
it's
is
so
all you have
funny.
to say.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "No, wait," and he hangs the phone up. And at that point, we hear bombers going overhead, and so we're like 2 seconds from, I guess, napalm hitting Greendale Community College.
Yeah. This reminded me of something that I recall seeing or hearing in The Simpsons, that Greendale was a designated weapons calibration location in the event of a nuclear holocaust, basically.
Okay.
Which is
Okay.
to say, like, the U.S. and other countries would just bomb the shit out of Springfield
Yeah.
to calibrate their weapons.
Sure.
That's kind of what this felt like.
It's wild, it's out of place, and I love movies and media that has an ending that means nothing to the story, but has huge stakes. And a great example. There's two examples. I'm going to spoil both these. So if you don't want to hear me spoil the movie's Possession and Don't Look Now, skip ahead like 3 minutes. So in Don't Look Now, directed by Nicholas Roeg, starring Donald Sutherland. It's a fantastic film. Him and his wife have a child. She dies, but his wife keeps seeing images of her throughout the town, and she wore this red raincoat. That's what she wore. And so Donald Sutherland's like, "You're crazy. You're post traumatic because of this." But then at the end of the film, he starts seeing this girl in a red raincoat, and so he chases her through the streets, the alleys, and when he catches up to her, the person turns around, and it's not his daughter. It's a little person who is also a serial killer who stabs him to death in an alleyway, and that's how the movie ends. Okay, so it's got nothing to do with anything in the fucking movie, but it's the most wild ending, and it's so memorable. So that's one of them. And then this movie Possession reminded me a lot of this. Possession's one of my favorite movies. It's got Sam Neill in it when he's super young, still super duper Kiwi, and Isabella Johnny. She's phenomenal in it, and he is like a worker for some undisclosed federal government, and he comes home and him and his wife are having a divorce. And throughout the film, both of them tend to go a little bit more insane. Like at one point, she has left the apartment and she comes back and she's like, "I have to do the laundry," and she picks the laundry up and like puts it in the fridge and closes the door. And it's never really mentioned that she puts clothes in the fridge. It's just something she does. Anyway, by the end of the movie, like Sam Neill has a doppelganger born out of like an alien's belly, and Isabella Johnny has gone insane, and the real Sam Neill has met a woman that looks just like her. And I thought, how can this movie possibly end? Well, at the very end of the movie, doppelganger Sam Neill shows up at their son's babysitter's house and knocks on the door, and right when he does, like, airplanes fly overhead and drop bombs all over the place. And that's how the movie ends. And it was so wild. And it reminded me so much of this. I thought, this is insane that they would do it. I wonder if it's like a weird nod to that, because why else would this be in this, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and also just, John, all of these times that Greendale has, like, the show, these characters, they were this close to it all ending, you know? Like, that's... Yeah.
And all it talk because Duncan inadvertently put in a top secret access code. Anyway, I love media that does that, and it reminded me a lot of that type of stuff. So, those are two phenomenal movies. Go watch them. They're incredibly good. That's all I have to say. This episode's jam-packed. It's a lot to watch, but it's well worth it. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun episode.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. Again, maybe it's not... Well, we spoke for over an hour, so that maybe I was wrong.
We got some juice out of it. I did talk a lot about movies this episode. I'm sorry. I'm trying to pitch my new movie podcast that's yet to be named. So I'm seeing what the feedback's like.
We're just getting a lot of backdoor pilots here.
Yeah, that's all that's happening.
For that pod. Yeah. No, I don't think I have anything additional to say, John. Shall we transition to our segments? Yeah.
Please do.
Yeah. John, I need you to tell me who makes your dean's list, which is to say, who would you identify as giving the best performance in this episode?
For me, is Hickey. I love the man. He's so good. He's got great emotional depth. Jonathan Banks, even though he looks like a very sad bulldog, a very sad basset hound of a man, he still has great range. He's very funny when he wants to be. I liked him a lot in this episode. What about you?
I think mine's Chang. He's really funny. He's really interesting.
So good. So good.
Like, I think yours, I can't disagree. He's a great choice. And there's just a lot of good choices for this episode. So
yeah. Check the syllabus, Colin.
Check the syllabus. Yeah. John, this is where we identify our favorite where we identify our favorite bits of metatextual referencing and intertextual play. John, what do you got?
Oh man, I don't know. Like that bumpers thing, I feel like that's got something to do with the media I love. I also, I do think, I don't know. I think the Dean, the Dean loving Chili's has got something to do with the insanity in that episode. I don't know.
Yeah.
But for me, it's the bumpers. The bumpers are like
Okay.
near and dear to me. I love media that does that. Colin, what about you?
John, I think mine is actually all of the references to the labyrinth and all of the ways characters in this show think about David Bowie. Because I think like Hickey's reading is probably more accurate, but for the Dean, he's a macho rock star.
A macho rock star.
Which is just like a stunning thing to say. So I think that's mine. John, do you have any best lines?
I have two. Oh my God, let me get my notes up. I'm so sorry. I took notes earlier and I forgot. Oh, I don't have two. I do have two. One of them is just Fat Dog for midterms because it makes me laugh.
Yeah,
this one is an Annie quote where she says, "Chang, your last idea was to murder," and I thought that was very fucking funny.
Yeah,
that's all I have. What about you, buddy?
So this is a Duncan line early. They really get the incest right. He's referencing that Game of Thrones show, which is, I don't remember the name. Who cares? These are not really lines. These are Abed's attempts to use sign language. I detonated a mollusk, I think is one of them. And the other one is banana train. Very funny.
And he says sandals at one point, which was very funny.
Sandals, very funny. I have the Chang, your last idea was to murder. This is an Annie Hickey exchange. Did you investigate pornography when you were a cop? Something like that. He just likes to watch porn, which is fine.
Yes.
You can't just repeat it. You need to explain yourself. Chang, what can we do here? Bear down for midterms. That was a
bear down for midterms.
Yeah, Jeff. Chang exchange. My power comes from a scarcity of parking, just like your dad's comes from a lack of hugs. That was mean but funny.
Pretty brutal line, yeah.
Yeah. You want me to talk? You want me to talk turkey? Well, gobble, gobble. I want ride shares gone. The news has been covering it all morning. That's where I got that idea. That's
so
Neil
good.
Chang exchange. Oh, man, this is bad. This is bad. We are in crisis mode. We are in crisis mode now. We really messed up, you guys. That's a Chang line post-realization. My God, Annie, what kind of a labyrinth? My God, Annie, what kind of labyrinth have you created? Certainly not the magic kind with puppets and macho rock stars. That's a Dean line. It's an expression, fat dog it for midterms. Like, don't sweat it, fat dog it. Hang out, relax like a fat dog. Nah.
Like a fat dog.
I think this is something Britta says after she realizes she hurt Abed's feelings. Let's be fat dogs about this. Very funny. This is that Brie Larson character. This is one of her lines. I started this coat check without permission anyway. Very funny.
Yeah.
And finally, what's your clearance level? Top.
And it works.
Totally worked. Yeah, John Phelps, that is our conversation for season 5, episode 6 of Community. He gets so disoriented. Analysis of Cork-Based networking. John, we have a Patreon page.
We do. We have a Patreon page. It's the first link in the show notes. For $3 a month, you get all the exclusive content. We haven't talked about what we're doing this month. This should be fun.
Yeah, we should.
It should be a fun
talk.
one. I turned 40 in 3 days, by the way. 4 days. The 21st of August, as the crow flies. So that's happening. Anyway, for $3 a month, you get all the exclusive content. For $7 a month, you become a producer of the show. You get all the content, a sticker, and we tell you how much we love you every single episode. Above that, you get a shirt, the sticker, the content, and above that, you get sort of whatever you want. You just let us know, and we'll make that a reality. So anyway, Yeah, we have some producers to thank.
We do. Yeah, if you want to support us at like $200, we'll fat dog something for you.
We'll fat dog whatever you want, man. I mean, you tell me. I fat dog. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, John, producers. Thank you to the following producers of the Hop-Ons podcast. Thank you to Katana, Crindy, Rachel, Kate, Daniel, Lars, Rob, Robin, Jeff, and Andrew. And the second link in the show notes is to our Threadless page if you would like some Hop-Ons podcast merchandise. And John Phelps, if someone were so inclined as to rate and review the podcast, what would you say? What would I say?
It would be very good. Ratings and reviews help the show get noticed, and we will read your reviews here on the air. You can hear the wonderful dulcet tones of my Appalachian vocal cords reading whatever you write. So if there's like words you really want to hear me say, throw them in there, and I'll get them out there for you. And that's it. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, very good. No, we love readings and reviews. Well, John, I think that's it. If there's nothing else for the Hop-Ons podcast, my name is Colin Cox.
My name is John Phelps, and I will see you at some point soon. Probably. I mean, I would think. I'll see you soon.
One can assume. Yeah.
Okay, bye.